You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans. Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I've got my batteries recharged. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I certainly enjoyed the break. I didn't have to watch sports as closely. I could actually sleep in. No, I'm only kidding. I did miss talking to you. There's no question about that. So even though it's raining outside, terrible day, ugly day, I'm going to push through it. I have to start with Saints Broncos. None of the early games really matter that much. People are reading a lot into the Raiders getting blown out. Yeah, terrible game. That happens. Giants-Bengals, Giants moving into first place in the NFC least. Hey, give them credit. They won the games that I said they needed to win. And now they're in the catbird seat. But if Daniel Jones misses an extended period of time, forget about it. The Giants aren't winning that division. Colt McCoy isn't going to be able to win that division for you. How funny would it be if it's Alex Smith and Colt McCoy duking it out at the end for the NFC least title? I understand the Giants don't play Washington anymore this year, but they'll still be duking it out in the standings. It'll be kind of funny to see those two ex-teammates going at it. Cardinals-Patriots. A lot of people are saying the Cardinals are terrible. Like, they're selling Cardinals stock right now. Maybe they've hit a little bit of a rough patch, but they're 6-5. They are in the playoffs. Now, they'll get destroyed by the Packers, but they're still in the playoffs. They were the worst team in the NFL 2 years ago. Maybe they're not the most impressive team in the NFL, but they're not a bad team by any stretch. I mean, good win for the Patriots, keeping their slim playoff hopes alive. But at the end of the day, those games don't matter. The two games that really matter are Saints-Broncos and Chiefs-Buccaneers. And there's a lot to unpack when it comes to Saints-Broncos. Obviously, they were playing with their fifth-string quarterback. Jeff Driscoll got the coronavirus. Drew Lock, Brett Rippon, and Blake Bortles were all close contacts, so they couldn't play. The Broncos had to go with Kendall Hinton, a salesman, not that long ago, was a starting quarterback in the NFL yesterday. Now let me just dispel one notion. A lot of people were saying that the Broncos should have signed Colin Kaepernick. And look, if the Broncos wanted to sign Kaepernick today, that's a different issue. But they couldn't sign Kaepernick to have him ready for yesterday's game. We found out that the Broncos were going to be screwed on Saturday. it would be impossible, literally impossible, for Kaepernick to go through all the protocols in time for yesterday's game. You want to tell me that the Broncos should have brought him in earlier if they knew this was a possibility? I think they were holding out hope that someone who was more familiar with their system would be allowed to play. And I'm not talking about a guy like Hinton or Rob Calabrese. No, I'm talking about a guy like Rippon, who the Broncos have won with, or Blake Bortles, a guy who's actually had success in this league. There was no way that Colin Kaepernick was going to start yesterday's game for the Broncos. It had to be someone like Kendall Hinton, someone who was already around the Broncos. And let me tell you, the NFL should have moved this game back. I understand why they didn't. A lot of these teams aren't taking the coronavirus seriously. Obviously the Raiders, obviously the Broncos, but look at the Ravens. They're having a huge COVID outbreak. The latest is that their game tomorrow is in jeopardy. The Saints had a draft pick taken away. The Patriots got fined. The NFL kind of used the Broncos as a scapegoat here. They said, if you're not going to take this seriously, we're going to force you to play with a wide receiver at quarterback. I mean, you've got to feel for Hinton. This guy didn't sign up for this. This guy was a quarterback at Wake Forest and couldn't even beat out John Wolford. Here's how bad John Wolford is. He was cut by the Jets once upon a time. If you get cut by the New York Jets, something is terribly wrong with you. So Hinton's last year at Wake Forest, he played wide receiver. Had a good year. If he's ever going to make it in the NFL, that's how he's going to make it. Not a quarterback. But Hinton trotted out there like a good soldier, and yeah, that was rough. For God's sake, the guy only completed one pass. He threw 2 interceptions. He had more interceptions than completions. Think about that for a minute. Noah Fant's going to be the answer to a trivia question. Who's the only player in NFL history that Kendall Hinton completed a pass to? Noah Fant. The NFL used the Broncos as a sacrificial lamb. They're 4-7. There's no chance they're going to the playoffs. So the league said, you're not going to take this stuff seriously? The fines aren't working? The stripping of draft picks isn't working? Alright, watch this. I mean, I can't blame the NFL for doing that, but it's not what I would have done. I would have moved this game back. I mean, what you did was turn yesterday's Broncos game into a laughingstock. Yeah, the Broncos don't have any playoff hopes, but the Saints are the best team in the NFC. You gave them the easiest path to a win that you possibly could. I mean, the Packers had it kind of easy too, because all they had to do was beat Mitchell Trubisky, something that they've done numerous times before. But in the spirit of competition, you can't let that game go on. Say what you want about Taysom Hill, but he's at least competent at quarterback. He can read coverages. He can throw the ball. He has moments where he looks really good. Kendall Hinton has none of those qualities. I mean, I don't want to be too hard on the guy. He never should have been in this position in the first place. But I'm sure he'd be the first person to tell you, yeah, I was out of my element here. The league really should have moved this game back. I understand it's a dangerous precedent to set. If you're doing it for quarterbacks, why wouldn't you do it for another position group? There's a really easy answer to that, and the answer is in the question. It's quarterbacks. You can't win without a competent quarterback. No one has been harder on Sam Darnold this whole year than me, but he's at least competent. We've got a lot of bad quarterbacks in this league. Guys who, if they go out there, will be destroyed instantly. The Dolphins' backup yesterday was a kid by the name of Reed Sinnett. Raise your hand if you've ever heard of Reed Sinnett. Now put it down because you're lying. No one's going to be mistaking him for Dan Marino anytime soon, but I'll tell you, he'd at least be competent. When I say competent, I mean able to actually throw the ball and complete some passes. I know why the NFL did what they did in pushing forward on this game, but man alive, you turned that game yesterday into a joke. I mean, it does bring up an interesting point. Is the NFL doing enough to combat the coronavirus? The NFL is one of the most powerful entities in the country. Look at all the testing they're doing. Look at all the protocols that they have in place. And look at the problems they're having. If you're Adam Silver or Gary Bettman, you've got to be nervous right now. At the end of the day, the NFL is bigger than the NBA. It's bigger than the NHL. If the NFL can't control the coronavirus, then the other leagues have no shot. I mean, I'll tell you, for the NHL and the NBA, there's really not much they can do to combat it except establish strict protocols, strict testing procedures, and hope you get lucky. But the NFL doesn't seem to have that luxury. They got through most of the season without any big scares. Yeah, they had some hiccups early, but after the Titans caused everything to be, rearranged, the NFL's been okay. Now, with cases spiking again all over the country, how is the NFL going to finish these last 5 weeks? The answer is something that they've been avoiding for a long time. Bubbles. They have to have bubbles. You've got to have home market bubbles until the Super Bowl. Then everyone goes to Florida, and maybe Disney would be okay with bringing back what they did for the NBA, just in a more scaled-down format. And I'm not even sure that would work 100%. You may still get a few cases here and there, but at the end of the day, we have to try something. There's a real chance that these next 5 weeks get more screwed up than what we just saw. You can't tell me that this can't happen again. I mean, the Niners are getting messed up. Santa Clara County isn't going to let them practice or play there. They're homeless. We need bubbles. And the only way it can work is in each team's home market. You can't do a central location. That can't work anymore. I brought up the idea of Texas before the season. That ship has sailed. The only way it can work is if you put everyone in hotels in their own market. We've got to keep these guys safe if we want to finish this season. The protocols are great, but if they're not followed, what's the point? I'm not saying it's easy. You'd need to find hotels with room, and certainly getting them food is going to be an issue, but I fear that we're nearing a point where the NFL is going to need to put a pause on things. I don't want that. I'm a Jets fan. I want the season to be over as quickly as possible. I don't know if home market bubbles are doable. I don't know if it keeps the players that much safer. I'm not a public health expert, but we've got to try something. We have cases spiking all over the country. The NFL isn't immune to this. You can have all the testing you want. That doesn't stop the coronavirus. Even a vaccine, the players are going to be really low on that list. You want to tell me that you don't want to do it for the regular season, but you're okay with it for the playoffs? I can live with that. At the end of the day, we've got to do something to ensure that this season gets completed and we can crown a champion. Like I said, we may be nearing the point of no return. Moving on now to Chiefs Buccaneers. And I'm not going to talk too much about the Chiefs. We all know that Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the NFL right now. And what Tyreek Hill did yesterday is superhuman. Hill had 7 catches for 203 yards and 2 touchdowns in just the first quarter. Since 1980, there have only been 3 NFL receivers to have 200 receiving yards in a quarter. Hill, Lee Evans, and Qadri Ismail. It was a superhuman performance. We all know that. But the big story is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The team that won the NFL offseason last year. You had Brady, you had Gronkowski, you draft Tristan Wirfs, you have Evans, you have Godwin. It should be smooth sailing, right? No. There's trouble in Tampa right now. They're 7-5. They've lost 3 out of their last 4. You take a look at their games this month. The Giants, they narrowly beat on Monday Night Football. Bad win for them. They get destroyed by the Saints on Sunday Night Football. They cream the Panthers. Okay, fine. Monday Night Football, you lose to the Rams. And yesterday, the game of the week, you lay an egg. Tom Brady throws 2 interceptions. You have Patrick Mahomes throw for over 460 yards. That's inexcusable. Mahomes or not, that can't happen. Todd Bowles is without question the most overrated supposed defensive mind in the NFL right now. Either him or Greg Williams. It's close. But at the end of the day, this is more on the offense than it is the defense. You take a look at what Brady's done in the last 4 games. He's thrown multiple interceptions in every one of them except the Panthers game. This is a Buccaneers team that were picked by some to win the Super Bowl. I picked them to be in the Super Bowl, but to then lose to the Ravens. Now, forget about it. They'll make the playoffs, but there's no way they're getting to the Super Bowl. Now, what's the seminal reason for that? The seminal reason is Bruce Arians. For starters, you can't throw Tom Brady under the bus publicly. In practice, do whatever you want. Lord knows Belichick did it. You want to tell me that Brady wouldn't respond to it the same way? That's a bunch of nonsense. Look at what Brady's doing now. He's handling everything really professionally. Yeah, he's getting ticked off by people repeating the same questions over and over again. That's why he ended his press conference yesterday so early, but he hasn't said, yeah, my coach is terrible. Why did I come here? Woe is me. I want to go back to the Patriots. He's not giving you any of that. So when you compare that to a guy like Arians, who is publicly saying that Tom Brady can't read coverages, it's pretty obvious that Arians is the issue. Here's a crazy idea. Instead of delegating everything, take more control of the offense. If you're this offensive guru that a lot of people think you are, then stop having Byron Leftwich control everything. Because Leftwich is the one calling the plays. Leftwich is no saint in this, but at the end of the day, it's Bruce Arians that put him in that position. Should Leftwich be able to call plays for Brady? Yes. But everything goes back to the head coach. Responde at superior. And when you combine that with a head coach publicly saying that his quarterback, who just so happens to be the greatest player in NFL history, is getting confused by coverages, that's a big issue. Look, I like Arians. I think he's a good head coach. But for whatever reason, it's not working with Brady. At the end of the day, I think Brady has gotten very used to the Patriots' way. Now, you can't emulate that if you're Arians. That's been tried before, and it's failed. But you do need to sit Brady down and say, okay, what plays do you want to run? Brady's earned that right. What you're doing isn't working. Sit down with Brady, sit down with Leftwich, and design some plays that Tom Brady can run in his sleep. You watch those Buccaneers games and you compare them to the old Patriots games, it's night and day what they're doing offensively. Let Brady have a say in what he wants to do offensively, let Arians have a say, and let Leftwich have a say. You brought in the greatest player in NFL history. If you're not comfortable doing that, too bad. Arians is also supposedly upset that Brady angled for guys like Gronkowski and Antonio Brown, and the Buccaneers are still underachieving. Arians' mindset is that the Buccaneers have bent over backwards to bring in guys who Brady's comfortable with, and they're still underachieving. That may be true, but look, that's the price you paid when you brought in Tom Brady. And if you can't make it work with these guys, that's not a Brady issue, that's a you issue. You can't say to Brady, this is what we're going to do offensively. Period. Case closed. No! There needs to be a dialogue there. Also, why wouldn't you want Gronkowski? Antonio Brown, I can understand. You had a bunch of wide receivers. But O.J. Howard has underachieved. Forget the fact that he's hurt right now. There's no way you could have known he was going to get hurt when you traded for Gronkowski. This is a guy who's never had more than 34 catches, 565 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. Do I like Howard? I don't think he's terrible. But why wouldn't you want Rob Gronkowski if you could get him? On O.J. Howard's best day, he's not as good as Rob Gronkowski. The fact that Arians didn't want Gronkowski proves that this guy's just in way over his head. He shouldn't be coaching Brady. He's not the right guy for it. Again, I like Arians. I really do. But for whatever reason, he's not able to coach Tom Brady. He wasn't able to make Brady as successful as he should have been. Unless the Buccaneers go on a crazy run, there's no way that Arians is coming back. Josh McDaniels may take over the Buccaneers if the Patriots don't promote him first. Speaking of head coaches, the Detroit Lions are looking for a new one. They fired Matt Patricia and their GM Bob Quinn. I told you when I was recapping the NFL offseason that the Lions were going to crash and burn. I had seen this movie before. They were trying to duplicate what the Patriots did. Bringing in all these ex-Patriots players that just aren't that good anymore. Jamie Collins is way past his prime. Trey Flowers is hurt. Duron Harmon is still really good, but he's not as good now as he was when he was with the Patriots. I've seen this movie before. It doesn't work. You try to duplicate the Patriots' way, and it crashes and burns. There was a report after Matt Patricia's first game as Lions head coach. It was against the Jets. It was Sam Darnold's first game. That the players didn't like him. If you ruffle players the wrong way after one game, something's wrong. And Quinn's no saint in this. At the end of the day, you have a really, really good quarterback in Matthew Stafford. And you never won a playoff game with him. Matthew Stafford has never won a playoff game. Period. Bob Quinn or no Bob Quinn. That's just fact. This guy's like Phillip Rivers. Stafford had Jim Schwartz coaching him. Schwartz wasn't that good. Jim Caldwell was okay, but the thing with Caldwell is he never pushed his teams to that next level. There are worse coaches in NFL history than Jim Caldwell, by far. Not even close. Caldwell has a career 62-50 record. But to the Lions fans saying they should have never fired Caldwell, that's revisionist history. Because Caldwell wasn't pushing the Lions to that next level. They shouldn't have replaced him with Patricia, but getting rid of Caldwell when they did was the right decision. Look, Stafford isn't getting any younger. He's going to be 33 years old when next season starts. If you're ever going to win with him, you have to do it now. If you don't think you can, that's fine. Let the new GM blow things up. Darrell Bevell is the interim Lions coach. Former Seahawks offensive coordinator. He was the one who called the goal line pass in the Super Bowl that was intercepted by Malcolm Butler. But Bevell's not a terrible offensive mind. It's the right decision to name him the interim coach. But whoever's coaching the Lions into the future, whether it's him, Eric Bieniemy, Pat Fitzgerald, Joe Brady, I don't care. He, along with whoever his boss is going to need to decide quickly, can they win with Matthew Stafford? If not, then you blow things up. I like Stafford. I do think you can win with him. But you've got to put a good system around him sooner rather than later. And you can't get blown out in national games. Darnold's first game, the Thanksgiving game against the Texans, getting shut out by the Panthers, which granted wasn't a national game, but a lot of people did want to see what P.J. Walker was going to do his first start. The Lions needed to go in a new direction. Patricia and Quinn weren't going to do anything. Right decision to fire. I'm going to be very interesting to see what direction they go in next. Speaking of GMs who lost their job, Dave Caldwell will be joining Bob Quinn on the unemployment line. He was fired as Jaguars GM. And look, I've said numerous times that I don't think the Jaguars' issues are on offense. I think it's on defense. And yeah, Caldwell's the reason for that. He stripped down that great Jaguars defense. No Ramsey, no Boye, no Calais Campbell, no Yannick Ngakoue. The only good defensive player they have is Myles Jack. But what's interesting to me is it's pretty clear the Jaguars were building for the future. They weren't looking to contend for this season. Why are you firing the GM if the team is doing exactly what the GM set out to do? Which is lose. They wanted to get a high draft pick. That's why they did everything they did. Now you're firing the GM. Why? If you're Shahid Khan, did you really think the Jaguars were going to be good this year? You didn't sign off on this plan? I don't get that. But going back to their defense being the issue, I've said a bunch of times, I think the Jaguars could be amenable to trading down if they get the first overall pick. Which they're not going to get. The Jets have that locked up. But just for argument's sake, if they got the first overall pick, I really thought they'd be amenable to trading down. Now, in addition to them not having a chance to get the first overall pick, even if by some divine intervention they did, there's no way they would pass on a quarterback. New regimes mean new quarterbacks. And if you're a new GM. In a perfect world, you wouldn't bring in a placeholder. Like an Andy Dalton, or a Jameis Winston, or a Ryan Fitzpatrick. You'd bring in a young quarterback. What I was saying about the Jaguars aged absolutely terribly. Again, I think their issues are more on defense than offense, and I expect them to be very aggressive in free agency in filling their holes on defense. But with the second overall pick, they're taking Justin Fields. There's no way they're not. They're not going to trade down. The new GM is going to want his own guy. And there's only one guy who I'd rather hitch my wagon to than Fields, and that's Trevor Lawrence. If the Jaguars luck into the first overall pick, they're taking Lawrence. No question. The Jaguars wouldn't trade down. I thought they could. Dave Caldwell did draft Gardner Minshew. And with their issues being primarily on defense, I thought he could be talked into it. Now, there's no chance of that. The Jaguars are going to have Justin Fields as their quarterback. That's just fact. As for Caldwell, the results just aren't there. The Jaguars only had one winning season with him as GM. That was their magical season in 2017, where they came really close to beating the Patriots in the AFC title game. I'm not saying Caldwell is a great football mind or anything, but I don't think he's terrible. I wanted him to have a little bit more of an opportunity to execute his plan. Realize, he was under the thumb of Tom Coughlin for some of his time as Jaguars GM. Caldwell tore this thing down and wanted to build it back up in his own image. Now he'll never get that opportunity. I don't think he's a great football mind. I don't think he's terrible. I think there are worse people in power than Dave Caldwell. But I understand the decision to fire him. The timing just doesn't make sense to me. Alright, now I'll give you some college football Valk talk. And I have to start with Sarah Fuller making college football history. She became the first woman ever to participate in a Power 5 conference game. She had one appearance. She kicked off to start the second half of Vanderbilt, Missouri, and it was a squib kick. Not the greatest squib kick I've ever seen, but it did the job. I mean, first, terrible job by Derek Mason to not let her kick the thing as far as she possibly could. Everyone wanted to see if she could get the ball to the end zone. I have no doubt that she could, but I wanted to see it. It's a great moment regardless. I firmly believe that women could be fantastic kickers. How many games have been decided because football teams have bad kickers? You're telling me that someone like Alex Morgan wouldn't be a good kicker? Megan Rapinoe, Lindsey Horan, whoever. I firmly believe, and I've said this before, maybe not on this show, but I've said it before, that if you can't find a good male kicker, try a woman. Look at the Jets. Sergio Castillo missed the easiest field goal he'll ever attempt in his life. I can guarantee you that Carly Lloyd would have made that field goal. And she's talked about becoming an NFL kicker before. Let her try. Let another professional women's soccer player try. And hey, if you're the head coach of a college team and you see you don't have a kicker, go to the soccer team, male or female, and say, I need a kicker. I want to see more of that. Sarah Fuller may have started a new wave of kickers. I firmly believe that now that the door has been opened, we'll see more female kickers in college football. Maybe even the NFL. After the game, Derek Mason was fired as head coach of Vandy football. It's the right decision. Derek Mason did a terrible job with Vanderbilt. They never had a winning record. They never won a bowl game. The guy's 0-8 this year. You can't go 0-8 in all-conference play and only have 5 wins in conference play in your last 4 seasons and still be a head coach. Mason had to go. Brings up the interesting question of who Vandy will go after. I'd expect them to go after Jamie Chadwell, the Coastal Carolina coach. You don't think he'd want to move up from the Sun Belt to the SEC? Coastal Carolina is 9-0. They should be in a huge bowl game this year. Give Chadwell a shot to coach a primetime school. He'd be my A1 guy if I was Vanderbilt's athletic director. Moving on now to ISU, Texas. And what did I tell you about Breece Hall? One of the best running backs in the nation, and you saw it at the end of that game. The big go-ahead touchdown late in the fourth quarter. I don't care that he only had 91 rushing yards. Alright? He had the big touchdown. That's his first game all year that he's been held to under 100 rushing yards. The guy's one of the best players in the nation. In fact, you can make the argument he's the best running back in the nation. Brock Purdy had a better game than I thought he would. Completed 25 of his 36 passes. Threw for over 300 yards. Was safe with the football. He threw a touchdown. It was a good game for Purdy. I'll give him credit. And I like that he got Charlie Kolar involved. One of the best tight ends in the nation. His best pass catcher, in my opinion. This was a statement win for ISU. Matt Campbell just enhancing his resume for NFL GMs if he wants to make the jump. As for Texas, I liked what Sam Ehlinger did. He played well. Completed 17 of his 29 passes, threw for just under 300 yards, was responsible for 2 touchdowns, killed ISU with his legs, had 15 carries for 65 yards. But it was his arm that wowed you. The throws that he was making to Brennan Eagles were insane, and the catches were insane too. I told you to watch out for Brennan Eagles. Believe it or not, I actually know a little bit about sports. Moving on now to Notre Dame UNC. There was no question in my mind that Notre Dame was going to win this game. But give UNC credit. In the first half, They played Notre Dame incredibly tough. It was tied at the half. Then the second half, Brian Kelly made some great adjustments to his running game. The blocking was exponentially better. Kyron Williams had a great game, 23 carries for 124 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. He also caught a touchdown. Ian Book had a solid game, not great, not terrible. But it was really Williams that was the star of this game. Although Javon McKinley does deserve an honorable mention. 6 catches for 135 yards. As for UNC, I expected them to be better offensively. Sam Howell disappointed. Only completed 17 of his 27 passes, threw for just over 200 yards. Their great running game, Javonte Williams and Michael Carter, that's carried them all year, non-existent. Carter had 8 carries for 57 yards. He wasn't the issue. But Williams had 11 carries for just 28 yards. Sam Howell, a guy who can run, only had 2 yards on 11 carries. That's not going to work for me. Bad game for Sam Howell. I want him to be so much better. I do like him. I think there's a role for him in the NFL. I think he can be a solid backup. But I don't think he'll ever be a star. And it's a shame because he has moments where he makes you believe he can be a star. Moving on now to Auburn, Alabama, the Iron Bowl. As you know, we've had some great Iron Bowl matchups. My personal favorite is the Kick Six. Hell, just last year, 48-45, the big upset win by Auburn. 2017, Auburn beating number 1 Alabama. 2014, Alabama beating Auburn 55-44. We have had fantastic Iron Bowls. This was not one of them. Bo Nix was dreadful. Threw for just 227 yards, threw 2 interceptions, couldn't get anything going offensively, and Alabama just feasted. Mac Jones with a fantastic game. Completed 18 of his 26 passes for 302 yards and 5 touchdowns. Let me tell you, Jones is working his way into first round consideration. I understand that he only has 1.5 years under his belt, but what he's done this year is sensational. He's not at the Lawrence and Fields level, but let me tell you, the season this guy's having, he's put NFL scouts on notice. He's completed over 76% of his passes. He's only thrown 3 interceptions. He's thrown 23 touchdowns. Isn't afraid to air the ball out. Yes, Devontae Smith and John Mechie are helping him. Just like they helped him in the Iron Bowl. But if Jones keeps this up, he has a strong argument for the Heisman, and it wouldn't surprise me if a team took him late in the first round and gave him a year or two to develop before anointing him as their franchise quarterback. That's the year he's having. And Najee Harris also had a really good game. 11 carries, 96 yards, and a touchdown. I didn't want to leave him out, but the story is Mac Jones. Until tomorrow, I am Jacob Valk saying that the toughest thing about managing is standing up for 9 innings.